Now, more of Illinois Rising, presented by the Illinois Opportunity Project, the only show directly addressing the problems and solutions for Illinois. Now, from AM 560, here's Dan Proft.
Welcome back to Illinois Rising. Joe Kaiser here with Mark Cavers, Vice President of the Illinois Opportunity Project. And Mark, the 4th of July week marks the one-year anniversary of the Illinois General Assembly passing a 32% income tax hike last year. They did this right around the 4th of July when everyone was out celebrating, having a good time with their friends and family. It was very nice of them. Now that we've had 1 year of the income tax hike, there's some data to go along with it to see how it's affected the state's economy. And this is the largest permanent income tax hike in the state history. And, Illinois hasn't really done well, in the last decade in terms of jobs growth. But in the last year, Illinois has seen, since the end of the Great Recession, Illinois has seen annual jobs growth of 1.1%, which is not doing too well. But in the year since the income tax hike, Illinois' employment growth was just 0.74%. So a 34% decline to the meager numbers that we had prior to the income tax hike. So the income tax hike we've seen in the last year hasn't really helped. But people got to remember also, this is the bipartisan fix to the budget impasse. This is the solution that they Republicans and Democrats came to agree on, and these are the results. It's not an improvement to fixing the budget impasse. It's not an improvement from what happened before the income tax hike.
Yeah, but we're not really surprised, right? I remember, so you were just saying July 4th you were working because we're all watching the debate on the floor, and you had a handful of strong Republicans calling out the budget for what it was. And you had legislators at the time. I remember Alan Skilcorn, Mark Batnick, Keith Wheeler, Tom Morrison told a story. I think each of them read emails or told stories about small businesses in their districts who had said, don't raise our taxes. We already have some of the highest taxes in the state. This will make things worse, and we'll have to leave. We don't want to. So a year later, it's played out like they foresaw, like we foresaw.
Right, and then you had these those are some lawmakers that were actually in tune with their districts and can see the results that's in real time of what's happening in their districts and are connected to their constituents. You had other legislators who were in the same party, David Harris, Terry Bryant, some others, who are saying, we need this. We need to end the budget impasse. It doesn't matter what's in the budget. It doesn't matter what's in the tax hike. We just need something to get past it because it helps politically. The budget impasse became kind of toxic politically, or it became an issue that was, forefront in the media for almost 2 years, and they just wanted something. It didn't matter what. They cared about their reelection. Some of these people, Terry Bryant or, Reggie Phillips over in Charleston, have universities in their district that were starved for funding, and then they felt the pressure from that, and they were worried about their reelection. They had a different perspective. They cared about the next election. So it showed kind of the contrast in what these lawmakers cared about when this whole fight was going on.
Well, and you saw that from Peter Breen, because I think right afterwards or even on the floor, he called it a blackmail budget. He said, we've gotten to a point because Madigan and the Democrats have failed and refused to budge at all, that now you have Republicans who have kind of boxed themselves in to having to make a bad choice. You talk about Reggie Phillips, who otherwise was, a reform leader, a guy who was fighting for lower taxes. But because we got so far into this and they had no plan out, they were blackmailed into voting for something they otherwise wouldn't have.
Right. It was kind of a crisis that was created, and you kind of saw who was going to stand pat and saying we need reforms and who wasn't. Now, moving forward, you have J.B. Pritzker and the Democrats talking about a progressive income tax hike. How do you see this playing out in the current makeup of the General Assembly, or whatever it looks like after November, with that pressure that could mount on Republicans?
I think we'll see a progressive income tax. If nothing changes, I think, the Illinois Policy Institute and you guys did a good job of thwarting it this past spring. But if Pritzker wins, if what we're seeing statewide, if you're going to see Republicans kind of swept out of power because they've been nothing but, a minority go-along party with the Democrats, they're going to get swept out, and then Pritzker and Madigan's supermajority are going to be able to put in, whatever tax rates they want, and they're already talking about it.
Yeah, and the scary thing about the progressive income tax hike is they won't give a specific rate just yet. There's some ambiguity behind it. Do you think if, let's just say, if Republicans aren't swept out and you have the current makeup of the General Assembly, do you think Democrats would be successful and J.B. Pritzker would be successful in pressuring their Republican colleagues into going along with something that is actually politically popular in the abstract when you don't have rates attached to it?
Yeah, but we've seen, to your point, we've seen the data for any rate that was floated. So Rob Martwick's bill was floated, and that's a tax increase, I think, on anyone making over 17 grand.
Right.
And so when we see that, that's not popular. And you got to remember, so last year was the tax hike. You had 15 Republicans who voted for it, and 11 of those guys are gone. And so for Republicans to go back this year, I don't think you'll see them join with Democrats, stand with Democrats to vote for a tax hike, because a lot of them have been held accountable. And, going back to the day of the vote, you had Mike Yunus talking about how, there were extreme fringe groups, like the Illinois Policy Institute, that was the only group opposing this budget. And what we've seen in the year past that is it's unpopular, and it's unpopular for Republican legislators who voted for it. 9, 10 of them retired rather than face a primary, and then another one lost their primary. So I think Republicans have learned their lesson, or I hope Republicans have learned their lesson, that if you're going to vote for a tax hike, there will be electoral consequences.
Yeah, it was a nice reminder that, and it's hopefully something that Republicans and Democrats remember going into a progressive tax debate, that a tax hike is not a popular opinion.